Welcome back to the Buddhist Podcast. My name is Noah Cease, and today we're going to talk about emotions in a variety of different ways. And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what this podcast is, what I want it to be, how I want to use it, and what kind of information I want to share on it. And I don't know. Originally I wanted to do this as a way of just getting mental health information out there, and just see, just free, solid mental health information. But that's also a little boring. I mean, there's so much health and wellness information out there that I was kind of thinking, well, maybe I'll make it about my own kind of interpretation of mental health things, yada, yada, yada. Point is, I'm still figuring out what I want this to be. And it makes me think of writing essays. And somewhere along the line, I don't remember where I came across this, but maybe it was a teacher, professor, who described essay writing as an experiment. And as it turns out, the word essay actually originally meant like trial or experiment, that kind of thing. So it's a test run. And that's what I'm kind of basically thinking about these podcasts as. These are our trials, they're test runs, and see how I like it, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. And along the way, hopefully I can send out some good vibes, good information, and, important thoughts worth considering. I hope. Fingers crossed. But today's I wanted to focus on emotions. So this is my verbal essay on emotions. Now, I think of myself as a very cognitive person, someone who's very thought-oriented, very attentive to my thoughts, my way of thinking, the content of my thoughts, very structured in my decision-making and measured, rational, all these kinds of things. And I thought that for a long time, kind of starting my freshman year of college after taking a philosophy class, go figure. And I really was like, okay, so my emotions are these kind of wild distractions that they're these temporary fleeting things, and that it'd be best to control my emotions and not act from emotion, but act from a rational state of being. Definitely kind of reflecting, enlightenment ideas, but also, for a large part, very, very ancient Greek philosophy kind of way of thinking, very stoic way of thinking in a lot of ways. And then, as I got older and got into my master's program, one of the tools that they taught us was using an emotions wheel or a feeling wheel. If you don't know what that is, do a quick Google image search for feeling wheel or emotion wheel. And essentially, it's just a circle, and there's 3 rings. And at the hub, the very center, are the more kind of core emotions, if there is such a thing. And then from there, you have a second and a third ring. And as you go outward from the center, the emotional words get more and more specific. So it's designed to help you start with kind of a vague feeling and then narrow it down more and more. What was kind of pounded into us in our in the master's program was to pull out the emotions that the client is feeling. Don't just ask, how did that make you feel? But based on what they're saying, the emotional expression on their face and their nonverbals, to try to pull the feeling out for them or help them be able to verbalize it. Instead of saying, how did that make you feel? Something more like, wow, that sounds like that was a very difficult period of time. Sounds like you went through a lot of grief, a lot of guilt, things like that. For me, I didn't really love that idea, though. Again, kind of coming from my understanding of thought and emotion was, well, the emotion is irrelevant. We can break these things down rationally. We can understand events of the past and our present and our hopes for the future in a very rational and constructive way. That the emotions are these kind of messy things that get in the way of actual comprehension. Well, I'm not going to say that I was exactly completely wrong, but I severely underestimated the importance of being able to understand and label emotions. Now I give every single one of my clients a feelings wheel, and I tell them to use it. I tell them, teach your family members to use it, teach your kids how to use it, because it is vitally important, no matter who you are, where you are in life, or any of that. And the reason is because although, yes, emotions are fleeting, they are temporary, and they do often get in the way of making, sound choices. As it turns out, human beings are completely and entirely emotional beings. At our very, very core, we are emotional, period. Rationality is a recent evolutionary development, if we want to think about it in that way. Our prefrontal cortex, where all of our logic, rational planning, language centers are. So from both an evolutionary perspective and a theoretical perspective, we're emotional. We really, really are. And if you really stop and think about the most rational decisions that you can remember making, what was it that finally really kind of put you into that choice? Because I can guarantee you it was the feeling that it was a good idea. I mean, how many times have you made a pros and cons list and the pros, had 3 or 4 or 5 more things listed on it than the cons list, and yet it didn't feel like the right decision? I'm sure many times. So yeah, as I've kind of grown in that understanding, it was like, okay, so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Rational thinking, I think, is very, very important. Being overwhelmed and controlled by our emotions. To use the image that Plato used, if the emotions are the horses drawing the carriage of the mind, we certainly want to be somewhat in control of those horses. We don't want them running away with our minds and leading us to God knows where. But at the same time, we can't deny the fact that we are emotional beings. So how do you go about, being an emotional person, being an emotional being as a human, without being overtaken by those emotions, without just completely being led into the dark by our emotional whims that change moment to moment? Well, the best strategy that I've kind of come to, the strategy that I give all of my clients, is to first and foremost be able to accurately label your emotions. That's where the feelings wheel comes in handy. So I tell them, anytime you start to feel stressed, start to feel overwhelmed, any emotion at all, agitated, irritable, frustrated, all of it, immediately pull out the feelings wheel and find on that wheel the most precise language that you can that matches the emotion itself. And then write it down. It doesn't matter if it's a piece of scrap paper, a Post-it note, but just pen in hand on paper, writing down, right now, I feel blank, blank, or blank. And maybe it is 2 or 3 emotions. My emotions are complicated. It's not as simple as I'm angry, therefore I'm angry. It could be I'm angry because I'm confused and irritable and tired and any number of things. So that's okay. So write it down. I feel X, Y, and Z. The more that you do this, it does a couple of things. First of all, as I noted earlier, we have these kind of two separate functions in the mind. We have this very rational, logic, planning mind, and we have a very, very emotional mind. When we feel an emotion, the logic mind wants to take over as this problem solver. So it's looking for reasons why that emotion would be there. It doesn't like the fact that the emotion is just there. So it tries to spin all these thoughts and conjure up these memories to understand, okay, what's going on? Why are we feeling this way? Why is this here? The problem is that it doesn't do a very good job of it. And maybe you can pinpoint the reason why you feel that way. But so much of the time, all that does is like I said, it conjures thoughts, and it conjures thoughts to emphasize the emotion. So it's coming up with memories of all the other things that could have made you feel that way. Well, that's just adding fuel to the fire. Now you're thinking of things to become frustrated over, and it happens so quickly. It's almost instantaneous. So thoughts add fuel to the emotion. So our logic, problem-solving brain is trying to solve the problem, but it's actually just making it worse. Because again, we don't need a reason for our emotions to be there. They're there already. We don't have to say, oh, you deserve to be here because of this, or you don't deserve to be here because of that. They're already there. You're already experiencing it. So, okay, that's enough. So how do you help the logic mind do its problem-solving thing without actually making the problem worse? You pull out that feelings wheel and you label it. So this is kind of a foraging exercise for the prefrontal cortex. And it's foraging for knowledge. It's foraging for understanding of the emotion. And then you get to label it. So you're using these higher order functions of search and identify and classify. And then that supports the emotion instead of fueling it. So it's like, now we've created a connection between the logic brain and the emotional brain. So now there's a deeper feeling of understanding within yourself. So you pull out that piece of paper, the emotion or feeling wheel, or maybe you have a screenshot on your phone. It's even better. You pull that out anytime you feel emotional. You label and identify exactly what you're feeling as precisely as you can, and then you write it down. If you have 5 or 10 minutes, it would be worth making it a kind of journal entry. Such and such just happened, or I just noticed that I was feeling X, Y, and Z. Here are some things going on right now that might contribute to it. But that writing aspect of it, again, even if you just write down, I feel X, Y, and Z right now, you're externalizing it. So when our thoughts are internal, when we're just keeping them in our heads to ourselves, the mind operates on a kind of loop, a circular system. And so even if you come to a really great insight or conclusion, chances are you're going to start that loop all over again in a few minutes, a couple hours, or a couple days, and then boom, you find yourself right back in that same spot. So finding a way to externalize those thoughts, usually I think the best way to do it is through journaling, handwriting. You externalize it, and then as you write, you're getting off of that circular loop, and you're creating a linear narrative, because we write and we think in narrative structure. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're telling ourselves a story about whatever is going on. So again, when we don't externalize that, we just keep it in our brain, in our head, then we're just on this circular loop over and over and over, repeating the same thing. But if we write it down, now the conclusion that we come to is solidified in an external form that puts it to rest in a much, much more effective way than just thinking about it. This is also why when working with trauma, we have people write out their memory as in as much detail as they possibly can, because thinking about it, it's not doing anything. But if you can write it down with detail and you get to a conclusion, well, now you've retold a story, and that helps synthesize the events of what happened. And so this is exactly the same idea. We're externalizing it, putting it in a linear narrative, and that allows our brain to synthesize the information and store it more properly. So that is the kind of very ABC structure way of becoming familiar with your emotions. But how do you prevent yourself from being overcome by emotions? And this is tricky. So something that I also have my clients do, and something that I do personally as well. When I'm feeling an intense emotion of sadness, grief, loss, anger, bitterness, resentment, any number of things. If I don't have the vocabulary for it, again, I go to the feelings wheel, I figure out what it is, and then I ask myself, what is it like to feel this emotion? What is it like to feel angry, bitter, resentful, sad, depressed, lonely? What does that feel like inside my own body? Not using more descriptive words and not letting my mind populate memories of similar instances where I felt those things. But quite literally, what is my body experiencing in this state of emotion? Do I feel a heaviness in my chest? Do I feel a pit in my stomach? Are my muscles tense? Do I feel hot? Are my palms sweaty? Is the hair on my neck standing up? And I take stock of exactly what is happening with my body and where I feel that emotion coming up. Again, this is a great way to unite our kind of logic problem-solving brain and our emotional brain. We are validating the emotion itself without feeding it the fuel of conjuring memories that make us feel that emotion intensified. So again, we look at the feelings wheel, identify what it is, and ask the question, what is it like for me to feel this emotion right here and right now? This is a really hard thing for a lot of people to start doing because emotions are intense, and that is scary. And for a lot of people, it feels like, well, God, if I acknowledge that the emotion is there, if I acknowledge that I'm feeling it, and I don't push it away, I don't distract myself, then I'm going to be completely overtaken by it. The floodgates are going to open, and I'm going to completely lose myself and break down. Well, first of all, so what? What's wrong with having a breakdown? What's wrong with bawling your eyes out and letting that grief and sorrow and anger, and what's wrong with those things being expressed through you through a breakdown? I mean, granted, we can't go off and have a breakdown whenever we want to. We have responsibilities, we have jobs, we have relationships and all of that. But I mean, really, what is wrong with breaking down from time to time when life is hard? Because life is hard. And you'll survive it. You'll get through it. A breakdown, an emotional breakdown at its apex lasts less than 2 minutes. The build up and the come back down might be a little longer, but the actual apex is like 30 to 90 seconds. And so you are the thing that endures all of the strength and height of the emotion. You're not the emotion itself. But again, we'll take a step back. So people are afraid to experience that emotion out of the fear that they will just be completely come undone and become this human puddle. That's fine. The other way to look at it is by engaging with your emotions more frequently, by identifying them with the feelings wheel, by writing it out more often, what you're doing is allowing for these controlled releases of the emotion itself instead of damming it up or shoving it down so far deep inside of you that you're going to have a massive break. You're going to have this massive breakdown, explosion, whatever metaphor you want to use. But by being connected with your emotions in these tiny outlets of acknowledgement, identification, and writing it down, it's like you're opening up these little levers to let a little bit out of time, a little bit out of a time, a little bit out at a time. And that helps you have much better connection to your emotions, for one, but also far more control over your emotional expressions. I talked about shadow work previously and how the shadow kind of snaps back at these certain kind of breaking points. Well, this is all the same stuff. By trying to avoid your emotions, by trying to shove it down or hide it or take distractions from dealing with it, all you're doing is compacting all of that into the shadow, and it will get released somehow. And if you're not doing it in these controlled and measurable ways, then it's going to be in ugly bursts that hurt yourself or hurt the people that you love. So if you want to avoid that, take these simple, controllable, measured actions of identifying it with the feelings wheel, labeling it, write down, I feel blank, blank, and blank right now. And then ask yourself, where in my body am I feeling this? Where is this existing? And again, if you're not adding thoughts, if you notice that your mind is starting to throw those memories back at you, just say, thank you. I don't need more memories. The emotion is valid. It doesn't need a reason to be here. That's fine. You just keep doing that. Keep saying, no, I don't need the memories. I'm here with the emotion. I'm here with the emotion. I'm here with the emotion. And the longer that you try to stick with the emotion itself, the feeling that is contained with you that the emotion brings, you'll notice that it really doesn't stay around very long at all. And it can't, because your mind, it gets bored. It gets bored of the emotion. If there's no fuel feeding and stoking that emotion, your mind wants to move forward. So emotions aren't that scary, big, crazy thing. They're just a part of you. And all they want is acknowledgement. They want acceptance. They want love. Just like we do, just like our ego does, just like every other person on the planet wants is love and acceptance. And you can begin to love and accept yourself once you know how to label your emotions, experience them firsthand, and accept them as they are without needing the fuel of memories to stoke those flames. So again, the more you practice this, the better you get, the more even keel you will feel throughout your day, throughout your week, and the more able you're going to start noticing you are at handling major stressors, whether at work, relationship, family, paying the bills, whatever the stressors are. The more you're able to tap this lever and let out some of that emotion in a controlled way, you're equipping yourself to better handle all of life across the board. And I think that's a pretty miraculous thing to be able to do, and to do it consciously. So where I thought I was, after my freshman year philosophy classes of being a totally rational person, I've finally kind of learned a way of using rationality to support and explore the emotional experience of life. And after all, isn't that what life is? A series of emotional experiences. And so if we don't really know how to recognize, if we never learn how to recognize and engage with the emotional experience that we have, negative and positive, then aren't we missing out on life? I mean, isn't that the most wonderful part of life, is the fact that we can experience emotions? And I do mean the full spectrum. So the greatest joys of life and love and connection are no better, and they are no worse than the deepest feelings of sadness and loneliness and shame. We are all of those things, and everyone is all of those things, and that should be okay. So that does it for today. Drop a comment below to let me know what you would like to hear about next. Nothing is off the table, and everything is off the cuff, apparently. Just too lazy to write a script for myself, really. So, that does it for today. Thanks for coming by.